This video was requested by a patron. See how you can request future video topics and get early access to videos by clicking the card in the upper right corner or by clicking the link in the description. And now, on with our feature presentation. About a month ago, I did a video about the infamous incident involving Lomas Brown of the Detroit Lions, where prior to the team's wildcard game against the Philadelphia Eagles, he infamously guaranteed that the Lions would win the game, and even went as far as saying that the game would be over in the first quarter, and the only question would be how many points the Lions would win the game by. Safe to say, that guarantee did not work out, as even though the game was over by halftime, just like Brown said it would be, it wasn't the way he wanted, as the Eagles wound up winning the game by a final score of 58-37, leading at 51-7 midway through the third quarter, so it wasn't even that close. If they wanted to, the Eagles could have absolutely dropped 70 on the Lions on that day. It was that bad. If you want to learn more about that incident and that guarantee gone horribly wrong, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So why do I bring that game up? Because that was a moment in the wildcard round where the Eagles were on the right side of history when it came to not taking an opponent seriously, being way too confident to the point where it hurts you, and where your cockiness came back to haunt you in a big way. Because 6 years before that, during the 1989 playoffs, let's just say that thanks to this man right here, head coach Buddy Ryan, that they were on the wrong side of that. It was a case of trash talk gone horribly wrong, and was a case of a coach not respecting the talents of a player on the opposing team, only for that player to be the main reason why the team won the game in the first place. During the 1989 wildcard round between the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles, Buddy Ryan had some rather interesting things to say about the play of Rams running back Greg Bell, and by the time the game ended, he was eating those words. Because this is the story behind quite possibly the stupidest playoff moment in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles franchise. Before I talk about the comment in question, as well as the performance that this player had, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, as well as how good this player was heading into the game. It's December 31st, 1989. It's the wildcard round of the NFL playoffs, and we have an absolutely big game on our hands over at Veterans Stadium on a rainy day in Philadelphia between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams. For the Rams, they got into the playoffs on the final day of the season following a chaotic game against the New England Patriots that came down to the final play, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, for the Eagles, they enter this postseason playing some of the hottest football of any team in the league. Following a 2-2 start, the Eagles won 9 of their next 12 games to finish the season with an 11-5 record, securing the wild card and securing their first home playoff game since all the way back in 1981, when they hosted the New York Giants in the wildcard round. As a side note, to learn more about that playoff game against the Giants, click the card in the upper right corner. Buddy Ryan had yet to win a playoff game in his 4 seasons in charge of the Eagles, so this game was huge for him to get the monkey off of his back and alleviate some of the much-deserved pressure that had been mounting, seeing as this was an Eagles team that had not even won a playoff game since the 1980 NFC Championship 9 years ago. Still, many people have the Eagles as favorites in this one, thanks to their strong defense, which was a Buddy Ryan staple. This was a defense that had allowed the 5th fewest points in football, and had forced more turnovers than any other team, forcing a whopping 56 turnovers, which was 13 turnovers higher than second place. For some perspective, the gap between second place, which was the Denver Broncos at 43, and 22nd place, which was a tie between the Detroit Lions and the Atlanta Falcons at 32, was smaller than the gap between second and first. And a big part of that was due to a suffocating run defense that played an instrumental part in helping the Eagles get to this point, as Philly finished the season inside the top 10 in the NFL in every rushing defense stat, including first in rushing touchdowns allowed. Thanks to a dominant defensive line with 3 double-digit sack players in Reggie White, Jerome Brown, and Clyde Simmons, who were good against the pass and against the run, it was tough for anyone to get anything going on the Eagles, especially late in the year, when over the final 7 games of the season, they allow 90 points, or 12.7 points per game, and allow 10 points or less in 4 out of 7. All of that boded extremely well for Philadelphia, because the only way that they were going to have any shot at beating the Rams was to stop this man right here. This is Greg Bell, and in the late 80s, there were very few running backs in football who were more feared than he was. He was an absolute touchdown machine, as after the Rams traded away Eric Dickerson to the Indianapolis Colts in 1987, Bell stepped up to the plate and then some, seemingly finding the end zone at will. The former first-round pick with the Buffalo Bills in the 1984 NFL Draft led the NFL by scoring 16 rushing touchdowns in 1988, while also finishing 4th in the NFL with 1,212 rushing yards, only behind Eric Dickerson, Herschel Walker, and Roger Craig in that category. He followed that up in 1989 by finding the end zone on 15 rushing touchdowns, once again leading the league in that category, while posting over 1,100 rushing yards. In total, from 1988 to 89, Bell had 31 rushing touchdowns. For some perspective, in the history of the NFL at that point, there were just 8 players to ever lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. Those guys were Dutch Clark, who did it from 1936 to 37, Earl Campbell, who did it from 1979 to 80, Jim Brown, who did it from 1957 to 59, Jim Taylor, who did it from 1961 to 62, John Riggins, who did it from 1983 to 84, Leroy Kelly, who did it from 1966 to 67, and Steve Van Buren, who did it from 1947 to 49. All 7 of those guys are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The 8th? Greg Bell. He was that good, and the Rams don't make the playoffs in 1989 without him. Seriously, they do not beat the Patriots on the final day of the season if it wasn't for his 210-yard, 1-touchdown performance on over 8 yards per carry. The Rams had the second highest scoring offense in football in 1989, averaging 26.6 points per game, trailing only the San Francisco 49ers for the top total in the league. And to say that Bell played a big part in that would be an understatement. So the goal for the Eagles entering this game if they wanted to win it was simple. Stop Bell. You cannot let him get going. You cannot let Los Angeles have any sort of ground game whatsoever. If Greg Bell gets hot and runs all over your defense, you will lose this game. Now it seemed like some of the Eagles knew this, and were very praiseworthy and complimentary of Bell's talents. As safety Andre Waters said on the Rams offense, "We have to stop Greg Bell. We're going to have to put a lot of pressure on them and force mistakes." So at least from the looks of it, the Eagles were not taking this one lightly, and were not dumb enough to underestimate the guy that had 31 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. That is, everybody except for good old Buddy Ryan. Of course it had to be Buddy. To be fair, the one time that Buddy's Eagles played Greg Bell and the Rams, they completely held him in check, and Bell got nothing going. On November 6, 1988, 1 year before this game, the Eagles won 30-24 over the Rams, and Bell had just 20 yards on 2 yards per carry, having his second worst outing of that 1988 season from a yardage standpoint. But instead of talking about how important it was to stop Greg Bell, and how even though that was one game, that was last year, we've seen what he can do if you let him get going, or how the Rams have a better offensive line now than they did in 1988, Buddy decided not to say anything like that. First, he decided to completely look past the Rams, pretending they don't exist, and was looking ahead to the divisional round of the playoffs and a possible date with the San Francisco 49ers. Said Ryan, "We're a good football team. I think we have a chance to beat the Niners if we get there." Ryan also continued, saying, "We are probably the only team in the NFL who can kick San Francisco's butt. Look at our game against them earlier in the year. We sacked their quarterback 8 times, and did everything we had to do." On one hand, I've got no problem with the coach being confident in his team. I've got no problem with the coach saying that his team has a chance to win a game, and that they match up well. Having said that, if you're going to do that, make sure you've got the right opponent. Don't talk about the 49ers when you're not playing the 49ers, and you still have to beat a very good Rams team just to get in that position. But that wasn't enough for Buddy. Not in the slightest bit. Because after that, a reporter asked him about Greg Bell, and the challenge that he poses. While Ryan said the right things at first, saying that he was a tough running back, and the Eagles needed to do a good job on him, that was clearly an act for the cameras and for the papers. Because the moment the press conference ended, he passed the reporters, smiled, and said to them, "Greg Bell, my blank." You can fill in the blank for yourself. Translation: we're not worried about Greg Bell. In fact, we're not even the slightest bit concerned about Greg Bell. The man who ran for 31 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons and has over 2,300 rushing yards in those 2 years combined? Not a problem. We've got this. We've got bigger fish to fry. We're on to San Francisco. So we now know how the Eagles really feel about Bell, or at the very least, how their head coach feels about Bell. I'm sure this won't come back to haunt Buddy Ryan and his team in any way whatsoever. With that in mind, let's see the very first play that the Rams had from scrimmage, just to see what exactly it is that we're working with here.
Ellard is the man in motion. And Everett goes right to work. Outside to Greg Bell. First down ran Moore. Bell out to the 40. Cut down by Andre Waters.
Oh no, it's going to be one of those days, isn't it? Literally, on the very first play, Greg Bell was out there making Buddy Ryan eat his words with a 23-yard reception. And don't worry, it gets worse. Because when the final whistle sounded, not only did the Rams prevail, taking it by a final score of 21-7 on an incredibly wet day at the vet, and completely shutting down Philadelphia's offense, especially in the first quarter, when the Eagles started the game off in just about the worst and ugliest way possible, but they did so thanks to the play of none other than Greg Bell. He was the MVP of this game. When all was said and done, Bell finished the game with 124 rushing yards on 4.6 yards per carry, including the 2 dagger runs at the end of the fourth quarter to put the game out of reach, when he had a 56-yard run to set the Rams up in the red zone at 14-7 late, and had a 7-yard touchdown run to ice it with 2 minutes left. Philadelphia only allowed 3.8 yards per carry that season. Against Bell, they allowed 4.6. Philadelphia allowed an average of just over 100 yards rushing per game across all players, including every running back, quarterback, and wide receiver when applicable. Bell blew past that average all by himself. And for an Eagles team that allowed just 6 rushing touchdowns all season, they could not keep Bell out of the end zone in the fourth quarter when it mattered most. Combine his 124 rushing yards with his 23 receiving yards, and you get a player that had 147 yards from scrimmage and was responsible for 36% of his team's offensive production, when no other player was responsible for over 22%. Bell was that important and was that good. Just as had been the case for most of the season, the Rams do not win this game without the play of Greg Bell. Oddly enough, in the post-game press conference, Bell did not say anything about Buddy Ryan's ill-advised comments that he quickly came to regret. However, his starting quarterback, Jim Everett, had some choice words for Buddy, saying, "I don't know what they're going to do with the 49ers game plan. A lot of things they said, things Buddy Ryan said, our players were using it for motivation. We're a better football team because we had to put up with a lot of pregame abuse. That comes with the territory. I guess it comes with playing Philly and Buddy Ryan. I don't think that one needs any sort of translation whatsoever. You overlooked us, you disrespected our players, you disrespected our star running back, and now you're paying the price. Good job, buddy! You overlooked and disrespected the one player that torched you throughout the game and put it on ice at the end of the day. I don't think that one worked out as you intended. It's funny because Bell did nothing else after the game. He had just 107 rushing yards over the next 2 playoff games that the Rams had before their 30-3 loss in the NFC Championship to the San Francisco 49ers. Then he played for the Raiders in 1990, where he picked up less than 200 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown before never playing again. It was as though after the Buddy Ryan revenge game, there was nothing left for him to do, and he disappeared into the sunset, never to be seen from again. However, the whole incident with Greg Bell and Buddy Ryan is a prime example of why you shouldn't disrespect your playoff opponents before you play them. Or at the very least, not like this. Don't overlook them for another team. Don't say that a player who led the league in a major category in each of the past 2 seasons is terrible and nothing to worry about. And just don't do what Buddy Ryan did. Because if you do that, and you let your mouth take control, as Buddy Ryan found out on this day in 1989, you're not going to have too many buddies left defending you. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.